Hello, my name is Becky Jones and I'm from Elements of Nutrition, and I just wanted to take some time to briefly explain to you why what we eat has an impact on what's happening in our gut, what's happening in our brain and what's happening in our body, such that just making a few changes to our diet can have a huge impact on how anxious we feel. So I'm also going to give you some tips as to what we can include and what we can maybe cut down on to reduce those symptoms of anxiety and just help us feel better day to day. So there are loads of pathways in which what we're eating can trigger anxiety. I'm just going to focus on a couple of those. So I'm going to look into how glutamate and GABA kind of balance one another out, and I'm also going to talk to you about how the friendly bacteria, our lovely bugs as I call them, have an influence on how we're feeling in general and how anxious we tend to become. So without further ado, what are glutamate and GABA? Well, they're kind of hormone signaling things within our body, these little compounds that we need to keep in beautiful balance. So glutamate is stimulatory, it's excitatory, it makes us feel kind of wired, and if we have too much of it, what is the result of that? That is anxiety. Our GABA, on the other hand, is calming, it's relaxing, it's anti-anxiety. Now, these things, ideally we want to keep them in a perfect balance, but we can end up with too much glutamate for a couple of different reasons. Now, our body tries to keep levels of this down by using glutamate up in various processes in the body, but then converting it into this GABA. Unfortunately though, in some instances, that conversion's just not working right. And if we are deficient in vitamin B6 and if we're deficient in magnesium, our stress mineral, then we can't make that enzyme, we can't do that conversion. So that's one thing to be really mindful of, get enough of those in our diet or in a supplement. Another way in which that can be affected is this glutamate can also be converted into glutamine. Now, we naturally do all of these things, but there are a couple of things that get in the way. We need manganese, not magnesium, but we need manganese for doing that conversion into glutamine. But we also need the absence of toxins. So toxicity within our system, within our bowels, as well as our body, interferes with this process. Another thing that interferes with that is gluten itself. So gluten is a mimic of this enzyme that does the conversion. And so if we are having gluten in our diet, the body gets really confused and it can start to attack gluten if we're sensitive to it, but also attack this enzyme, so we therefore can't convert it properly, and we end up with too much of this glutamate. Another thing that we need to think about is not just those pathways, but what's happening to our friendly bacteria and our not so friendly bacteria inside our gut. So when these guys get out of balance, we end up with something called dysbiosis. Now, our good bugs, as I'm going to call them, these are what we tend to increase in our body when we're eating a good diet and we're having a low stress life. They love low inflammation, relaxed state, love vegetables and fruit and all of those good things. Bad bacteria, on the other hand, they love sugar. They love inflammation, they love a stress state, they want us to be in a poor state of health and then they can proliferate. And we end up with this imbalance in bacteria that contributes to further inflammation, and it means that we can't manufacture serotonin, our happy hormone. We then can't manufacture melatonin, our sleep hormone. And if you experience anxiety, you'll know that that double-edged sword of not being able to sleep and being in an anxious state is really not great for how we're feeling. So what can we do then to increase these friendly bacteria? We need to give them more of what they love and reduce the things that they don't enjoy, our friendly bacteria, but that make our bad bugs flourish. So I'll give you a few tips as to things that we can cut down on first of all. So alcohol. Our good bugs don't like being in the presence of alcohol. The metabolites of it are toxic to our body. Alcohol also causes us to be dehydrated, and it contributes to further levels of anxiety. It affects our sleep, so there's early stages of sleep where we need to heal, and obviously that affects how we're going to process things through the day and the state that our body and brain are going to be in. It affects those crucial neurotransmitters that are responsible for our feel good. Caffeine. So some of us are okay with some caffeine, some of us aren't. It depends how sensitive you are. But caffeine basically reduces our levels of serotonin, our happy hormone. So therefore we can end up in a depressed mood. Matcha tea, though, on the other hand, if we were going to have a little bit of caffeine from matcha, and this has an amazing compound called L-theanine in there, which is very relaxing on the body and mind. Another thing that causes us to be stimulated and feel wired is added sugar. So any kind of refined foods that contain added sugar, they contribute to these kind of sugar spikes and lows and spikes and lows and spikes and lows, and we end up feeling hungry, and then we can feel hyped, and our body's in a constant state of having to work to try and keep us in balance in terms of our mood, our hormones, our insulin, and our energy levels. So if we can keep those blood sugar levels stable by avoiding adding sugars, that is really, really helpful for us. A lot of sugars are hidden, so please read your labels. I've mentioned gluten already, and it's because of that imbalance in the pathways that I was talking about. Now, when we get out of balance with those pathways, it's this kind of teetering seesaw thing. If we have too much gluten, or in any gluten, depending on how sensitive we are, we can end up either anxious, which is having too much of this glutamate, or we can end up low, so like depressed by having too much GABA. We really need to keep those in balance, so it's dead important. And cutting out gluten seems to really help with that. It also keeps down inflammation, because our gut, we can end up with leaky gut if we don't respond well to gluten, and many of us don't. And leaky gut can then lead to other kind of toxic symptoms within the body. So just try it. Try a diet of 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks without having gluten in there, cutting down on the alcohol, cutting down on the caffeine, and just see how you feel. If you aren't sensitive to those things and you don't see any changes, then that's great. There are other avenues that you can look at, but just try it and see how you feel as a result. So what other good things can you include? Fibre is so absolutely crucial. The soluble fibre that feeds our friendly bacteria that we're getting from our vegetables and fruit, and there's insoluble fibre. So that's tends to be the husk around cereal grains like wheat and oats and things like that. Give us good amounts of those fibres. Now, our insoluble fibre, our roughage, basically swells up, it keeps lots of water in there, and it moves all the toxic stuff out of our bowels, basically keeps us nice and regular. So that's really important for keeping down that anxiety and inflammation. But the soluble fibre is actively feeding our friendly bacteria, and these are the guys that keep us in a low stress, low anxiety state. So that's crucial. Every single day, at least your fibre day, more if you can do. Brazil nuts. So nuts, dead important for the health of our brain. Those good fats are essential for formation of the membranes around the cells in our brain. Plus they help fight dry skin and dry eyes and all of those things. But Brazil nuts, just having a couple of those every day provide us with selenium. Selenium, dead important for reducing anxiety levels. Oily fish as well. Oily fish is our brain food. We've always been told fish is brain food. Having plenty of that, so at least a couple of portions per week, gives us omega-3. Omega-3 reduces inflammation, and inflammation is linked with anxiety. So keep top on your oily fish. Another thing that we can get from oily fish is vitamin D. Now it's all over the press at the moment, hurrah, we need more of this stuff than we actually manufacture ourselves over summertime. During winter we need to be topping up on it from a supplement as well. And it is a mood lifter basically. It helps us feel better, which is fantastic, but it does all sorts of other stuff to improve our brain health, to improve our bone health and teeth and things like that. But at the moment we're focusing on it for our immunity. It does that as well. And if we can improve our immunity and reduce our anxiety, our worries about catching infections, then all the better. And then finally, I'm going to end on a fun one, dark chocolate. So we know that your regular chocolate, your milk chocolate, not only a source of dairy, which can be inflammatory in some people, but a good source of added sugars as well. If we can swap that to a dark chocolate that is a much higher percentage of cocoa, doesn't have the dairy in there, and has got a much lower sugar content, then we are giving our body this amazing stuff called theobromine. And theobromine helps our lung tissue to relax, it helps our muscles to relax, it helps our mind to relax. So when we're craving chocolate, partly this is what our bodies are after. It wants something to aid us to relax. It's also a source of magnesium. I have told you how crucial magnesium is for lowering stress and lowering anxiety and why that happens. So grab yourself a couple of pieces of dark chocolate every day for that feel-good factor. Make sure that you're including that oily fish, your Brazil nuts and vitamin D, and getting loads of fibre, so lots of veggies, and keep hydrated. Our brain is about 70% water. If we don't stay hydrated, our cells can't work properly, they can't take in what they need, they can't shove out what they don't need. And so stay hydrated. Look after yourselves. I hope you found this useful and informative, and good luck on your journey.